Hi, I'm Jim LeGrand. I teach at Messiah College, and one of the courses I teach here is the CCC course, the CCC core course. And one of the readings that every year students at Messiah College, first-year students, read is a short story by Wang Anyi, The Destination. And I'm very pleased that today I can be here with my colleague, Stella, who can help us understand a little bit more about this story, about the author, and about the context out of which it was written. Stella, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Hi, everyone. My name is Stella Ye. My last name is easy to remember. It's like, yeah, you're very excited that we have a Chinese program here. So that's right. I came last fall to Messiah College to build the Chinese program. So now we offer all years of Chinese language courses. And I was born in China. I came here 8 years ago to pursue my master's degree. That was at the University of Alabama. And then I went to Atlanta for my PhD degree in linguistics. And after all my graduate work, I came here. I've been teaching Chinese at Georgia State University before and also at Kansas State University before. And I love my work here. I love students, good students.
Well, we're very glad that you're here, Stella, and glad, among other things, that you can help us, as I say, understand a little bit more about this story. You and I have both read this.
Yes.
At one level, it's a story about family. It's a story that many readers, American readers who don't come from the same background as the author, might connect with, having a family of their own. But there's many aspects of it that that are distinct, and sometimes American readers or non-Chinese readers sometimes have a little bit of difficulty, I think, kind of connecting with. So I was wondering if you could start by telling us a little bit about Chinese history, particularly the Chinese history that plays out in this story, and what's helpful for readers to know about Chinese history to better understand Wang Anyi's The Destination.
That's a good question. I think it will help readers understand this background better. The most important historical event I would put this into is the Cultural Revolution. It's 10 years from 1966 to 1976. The main reason that this was started was because around 1966, Chairman Mao Zedong, he wrongly thought that the biggest problem in China at that time was the class conflict. So he was trying to find all the capitalists out and try to from the bottom of the society to overturn the capitalism. Actually, at the time, there was no capitalist. It was a wrong thought. And with that revolution, the young intellectuals, not just the kids after 18 years old, but all the young intellectuals from 16 to 24, all of these young intellectuals, they were forced to go to the countryside. So, the policy was they were forced to go to countryside to learn from farmers, peasants, and they were forced to do all these basic chores in the farmer, like that. So, the Chen Xing, the character, Chen Xing is the second brother. Yeah, so his last name is Chen, first name is Xing. So Chen Xing, we use last name first, Chen Xing, and I'm going to say that more about the culture. So Chen Xing was forced to go to Xinjiang for a long time. I think it's 10 years, and then he returned back. So that was the background of the story. Right. So also I want to mention that if you remember the story, that Chen Xing was forced to go to the countryside, and a lot of young intellectuals were forced to go there. And it's 10 years. So these young people passed the best 10 years of marriage. They couldn't foresee what's going to happen in the future. So some of them got married with local farmers or peasants, and they could never return to the big city anymore. But some of them did not get married. So later, after 10 years, like Chengxing could come back. But we'll talk about that. You know, when Chengxing and the number 3, the third brother, when they met this Chengxing's friend, the female friend, in the, I think it's a market, and the female friend was, you know, was not married, and the number 3 said, you know, she's a dead crab, something like that, right? So it's a big tragedy. 10 years, it's a big tragedy. I mean, all those young intellectuals' their lives were ruined. You can say that. So that's a big background history. Cultural Revolution, 1966 to 1976, and the young intellectuals were forced to go to the countryside.
What might you be able to tell us, Stella, about Chinese culture and the Chinese family? You're someone who's obviously experienced both Chinese culture as well as American and North American culture. But many people reading this story, including some of our own students, only really know one culture. What can you tell us about Chinese culture, the Chinese family, that maybe, again, would help them better understand the story and better get into it in a sense?
Okay. I think this story, Wang Anyi's story, the novel, reflects a lot of aspects of Chinese culture which might sound very interesting to you, to the readers. I'm going to illustrate some important ones that will help you understand the story. The first one is Chinese culture is basically collectivism. But American culture is more, or we can say Western culture is more individualism. With collectivism, one aspect is children should be obedient to their parents, their teachers, their leaders in the workplace, and eventually to the government. They should be obedient. So in this family, if you remember the story, the family, you can see this obedience from the mother, the big head. Their father passed away, I think. So their mother to the older brother, and then second brother, and then number 3. And number 3 obviously has less say in the family, in the dining table. So that's the big concept. And that also reflects the name. We say last name first, then first name. Another thing is in China, parents or older brothers or sisters usually have high expectations of the children. They want children to have good grades in school. They want their children to have a good work after graduation, no matter how old children are. So I don't know here, you know, when you're 40 years old, I don't think parents still have something to say about you should do this, you should do that, you know, you should work harder, something like that. But in China, the parents always have this high expectations, and they seem to care about everything about you. And that that's the second one. That also reflects to the third one is the bond. In China, the bond between children and the parents is very strong. Is always very strong, no matter where children are. Like I'm here in the U.S., I have, you know, I usually don't go back very frequently. That doesn't matter. Or how old I am, that doesn't matter. The bond between me and my parents and I have one younger brother, and my younger brother, our bond is very, very strong. That can be reflected in the story when Chengxing, the second brother, came back from Xinjiang. The whole family went to pick him up, and the mother made a big table of Chinese dishes from 3 a.m. And the mother cried when she saw Chengxing because she hasn't seen him for a long time. Last one would be the fact to understand China. You know, in China, there are lots of people. So many people in China that we don't have a big house to live. So it's common for children to live in home with parents, or even it's common for 3 to 4 generations to live under one roof, under the same roof. Mm-hmm. Now it's getting a little better, but at that time it's very different. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think I still need to mention one last difference is it's not about culture, but it's geography. Mm-hmm. Geography, the difference between countryside and countryside life and city life is there's a huge difference between them in China than here. Here we live in Mechanicsburg or Grantham. We have a Walmart, the grocery store. We have meat. We have everything we want. Same as in Philadelphia. It's not that much difference. But in China, especially at that time, still nowadays, the difference is huge. Remember, it's a huge difference. If we want to measure this in terms of money, maybe like $10 in Xinjiang and $100 in Shanghai. I'm going to point the map the places the story mentioned. So I hope it's easier to understand. So here, this is a map of China, and it's easier for you to remember. We would say the map of China is like a chicken. Yes, like a chicken. So this is basically this is like a chicken head. 2 feet. Do you see? 2 feet. And this is the tail. So it's like a chicken. So that would help you remember the China map. So here is Shanghai. This is the East Coast. So big cities are all here. All these places are considered countryside or rural areas. Shanghai, let's find Shanghai. Here's Shanghai, this area, Shanghai. And where's Xinjiang? It's in the tail. Here's Xinjiang. And if you want to say, countryside, this is the poorest countryside in the whole country. So we can see that Chengxin has such a big, surprising moments when he came back on the train. He saw things outside, and his memories of the old Shanghai. Shanghai has changed so much. The luxury life, it's so different. That contrast of Chengxin's feelings is reflected here, Xinjiang and Shanghai. Okay, so the chicken map, you remember that? Good. Okay.
So that distance is enormous, not just in miles, but in economics, in society, and culture. Having to go there, you mentioned required to be there 10 years by the dictates of the Cultural Revolution, but then having to make the return trip and all of the tensions and difficulties and longings that brings about.
Yeah, and just that you mentioned about returnings, not everyone can return. So in order to be able to return to the big city, a lot of story happened. For example, some guys already married a local woman. They would give them up and come back, give up the wife and the children, they come back. Or, some woman would sleep with people in order to get the certificate to come back. A lot of stories, we can't cover that in even an hour session. But I just want to draw the attention to the fact that Xinjiang is a very, very, very poor area. It's like Siberia. You can say it's a Chinese Siberia. Yeah.
Good. So we've talked about history and family and geography, and I think everyone will remember now
the map.
That's
yes.
right. And where the countryside is. It's in the tail.
For the countryside, sorry, can I have something more to say? I don't know if I have explained the difference between Xinjiang, the rural countryside life, and the city life already well.
Go ahead.
That in the countryside, you don't see a shadow of meat for months. But in the city life, you can have meat maybe once a week. So it's that poor. Yeah. It's hard even for me to actually really understand the difficulty of living there in the countryside life. It's because I was born in the year already past that. That years, you know. I wasn't born in that generation. I think I'm very lucky. But I was just trying to emphasize the difference and how poor and how life is difficult there for these young intellectuals. Yeah.
So this is a poverty, at least for those who live in this rural Chinese countryside at the time, that probably many readers today just can't even imagine.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
One of the other themes of the story, or the things that comes out that I think strikes many readers, in addition to these things we've talked about, is the issue of education. You mentioned earlier that there is a tendency for Chinese parents to have very high expectations of their children, I guess maybe it's fair enough to say, to put pressure on them even into young adulthood, into adulthood. And in the story, one of the ways that expresses itself is in education, hopes for education.
Yes.
Wondering if you could tell us a little bit about Chinese education, both what you see in the story, but maybe also your own personal experience with this and your family's experience.
Yeah, that's a good question. The education is very different between America and China. And the big thing is we call this entrance exam. It's called entrance exam. In Chinese, it's 高考. 高考. It's a Chinese word. 高考 is similar to SAT, but it's not the same. 高考 is the only requirement to go to college or university. That's the only standard. So, and it's one time you walk into the the test area and you finish the test, you walk out, and that moment, that 高考 decides your future. Whether you're going to enter the college that will brings you to city life and you have meat, or you have to stay in the countryside and don't have meat to eat. So 高考 is really a life deciding moment. That's a very, very critical moment in my lifetime. And still nowadays it's the same. It's that one moment. But here I think SAT, it's important, but it's not like you can have some other good records, right? Yeah.
So does this help explain Chen Jing's attitude or his resentment towards
number three? Yes. Everybody was talking about that, and you should review the 高考 materials. You should take 高考 again. You should go to college. And I don't have that opportunity because Chen Xing was in Xinjiang all those years. He didn't have this opportunity. But number three, you have this opportunity. Why don't you do it? Why don't you work harder? So it's the family pride if someone can go to college. And I would say there is a disadvantage of this 高考 system, because the Chinese education emphasizes the grades so much that we have high scores on paper, but after we get a job, after we enter into society, we don't have good social skills or those practical skills to solve problems in real life. So that is a main problem, I think, that is brought by Gaokao or this whole education system or emphasis. Yeah, I think that a lot of people, argue about the disadvantages and advantages of the Gaokao system.
Mm-hmm.
But reflecting on the Gaokao, when it was time for me and my bigger older brother to go for Gaokao, we were very aware of the importance of Gaokao, and we would spend every minute to study for Gaokao.
So it sounds like there was some amount of pressure there. Would you say that was pressure that was directed from others, from your family and parents, or was that internal, or was it both?
I think it's both.
Okay.
Also from the society. The big society emphasis is grades. Whether
Mm-hmm.
your kids are doing well in school, that doing well is not measured by other things. You can have good basketball skills, doesn't matter. You like volleyball, that's fine, I don't care. Do you have a good grade? Do you have A or B? A is good, A plus is good. B plus, you should work harder. Yeah, and parents, also compare with each other. That's not a good, phenomenon, but they like to compare.
Mm-hmm.
And kids' scores is one thing to compare as well. And whether their kids go to a college is one thing to compare. Whether their kids go to a famous college, Harvard or UPenn, which one, that's also something to compare. This whole system emphasized on the grades. Yeah.
Can you think of any other, maybe they might be personal experiences or understandings of Chinese society, Chinese culture that you think would be helpful for folks who are today reading Wang Anyi's The Destination to know something about?
Wang Anyi, the author, this author writes a lot of stories about this generation stories. I think the one this book chose is a good one to reflect this whole thing. One thing I would say is the society is changing, so it was a very, very representative piece of the culture and history in that period. Not necessarily in nowadays. Nowadays, a lot of Western phenomenon is brought into China, and we need to have this evolving eyesight to look at China. Yeah.
It's interesting. So would there be fewer Chinese today who would have any direct contact with that generation then that was forced to the countryside during the Cultural Revolution? Is that what I hear you saying? Do you have any family members, any of your either of your parents or grandparents who were forced into this kind of experience that this character in the book was?
In my family, we have few relatives, so I don't remember my father talked about any relatives who were sent to the countryside. But we were in the countryside, when I was small. Okay. I was born in the countryside.
Okay.
But my parents often talked about it because that was my parents' generation. And during that 10 years, theoretically, well, there was no college during that 10 years, but theoretically there's middle school and high school. But almost, it's not in practically existing. So my father, he was a high school student, and he didn't finish his high school because of that. So everyone was, on the street, push the movement forward, movements like that. So it was a tragedy.
But you're saying China today, much different place than that.
Yes,
than that kind of political agitation and disruption. And,
oh yeah, very different.
Mm-hmm.
I would still emphasize that was the wrong thought by Chairman Mao. And well, so that if you're interested in Chinese history, and we have this disadvantage and advantage discussions of Chairman Mao, a lot of discussions about him. He did a good thing before 1966, but then that wrong thought brought the whole country back many years. China would have been developed better, I mean, if we don't have that tragedy 10 years.
As we wrap up here, I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about the Chinese program here at Messiah. What brought you to the program here, and where it is now, and where you hope to see it go?
Oh yeah, I'd love to. So now we, from last fall, we offer Chinese majors. We have Chinese Studies major, Chinese Business major, and also Chinese minor. Well, with Chinese, most students might think Chinese is difficult. We might have a bad GPA in the Chinese class, but as you can see, actually, in my current classes, students are having fun. And Chinese is not as difficult as people thought. The main difficult thing for Chinese is writing characters. But in our curriculum, because that's my research area, in our curriculum, we focus on speaking and listening skills first, to help students build a solid foundation in being able to confident to speak Chinese, and then slowly introduce the writing system. So it's a gradual system. It's not like day one, come here, you write 10 characters, you can leave. But on the other side, it's you come and we talk in Chinese, and Chinese students now, they have high achievements, and I'm very impressed with that. I would say Messiah students are much more smart, diligent, and are very conscientious of what they are doing. And with our program, we also offer many cultural activities like tea ceremony. I brought this from China, and sometimes I do tea ceremony demonstration. And I also bring students to China in the May trip to go to Great Wall. Yeah, Great Wall. And also in Xi'an, we have terracotta horses. And also during the big event, I make like a dumpling, make dumplings from scratch in Rafiki house. And also sometimes we have calligraphy event. So I'll teach you how to use the brush to write calligraphy. So a lot of fun things are going on in our classes. Like the culture we mentioned today, we also mention this in our classes. Gradually, students have high competency in Chinese. Well, based on all of that, I would say nowadays it helps students to help them for their career. That is the most important thing. That's why I keep encouraging students to take Chinese. After they graduate, if they have this, their experiences of taking Chinese classes or have a Chinese minor even, their career will be widened, broadened a lot. They will have a lot of opportunities. One good example is the accounting major. I know the big four company, one company is in Harrisburg, and my one friend of mine was in that company as a senior, and she told me in their company they never refuse Messiah accounting graduates. I said, wow, I don't know, Messiah College is so good. They said yes, and they said we have 8 offices in China, in 8 big cities. Now I think it's 9 or 11. They said it would be even better if they have some Chinese background, take some Chinese or have been China, they would send them to China, for some work purpose. So welcome to take Chinese. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Stella, for your role here at Messiah in the Chinese program, and for helping our students understand a little bit more about the setting for Wanganyis, the destination. Thanks very much.
Thank you. You're welcome. Come by. Thank you.